Thanks so much for sharing this wonderful work with us. I guess I can start with one question and then opening up to everyone and like have a conversation about, you know, where you're going and also the entire work. One thing I really like when I look at your work, I notice that it's very sensory and haptic, and you have this really close relationship, intimate relationship with the work that you make. And you started talking about some of your like women's studies and feminism, and I want to know like what do you, especially using technology as a tool, how do you think you as a woman artist, your approach to using technology differs? Like you want to make these machines, you have this very intimate and close and emotional relationship to these, and even your audience, you encourage them to have this like interesting emotional experience with these creatures. And first of all, do you call them he or she?
Depending, like the breathing is he, the sweating is she.
Okay. So do you want to talk a little bit about how much like you think that kind of background, and also like as a woman artist who's dealing with technology, which is kind of like men's area for a long time, how does that affect your work?
Yeah, I don't, yeah, it was first, at the very beginning it was like that. I was like, oh, well, how I could relate, and I'm a woman, and I'm using technology, so I was really looking at those artists that were using technology and were females and were like addressing their things with technology. There's like a whole, especially back in the 90s. I don't feel like now it's much like that. It's not like that, but in the 90s it was like that. You have the cyber feminism movement, right, in net art. That it was actually in the 90s when these women were like, okay, we're gonna like take man's tool and make this revolution, right? Which was man tools, this. And also art. I mean, there's two things where mainly masculine art and technology, and we're going to use this on purpose. And I was really interested on that, like in reading their descriptions. But later on, I realized I sort of started engaging more with more than perhaps with like the otherness, sort of. I know it's just not about because I'm a woman. And especially I think that they became even more noticeable when I arrived here.
Got it, yeah.
That it was not just because I was a woman, and there was something else that was more like different to me, like now, for example, and it was language was one of these.
And how does that, like the semiotics of the titles of your pieces are very interesting, and they are very coded in a way. And is that the reason? Like, does that go back to your semiotic background?
Yeah.
And how does that lead the work, or this is something like a title comes afterwards? What's your relationship with those?
It's always a hard thing. Sometimes, I mean, when the robotic things are, it was very easy. The last one I didn't say the name is tik, which is like a Maya word to say clay or mud. Those kind of like come with the work. Whereas the performance, they take me so much time to come up with it, because I just see it and then, what is it? I think the semiotics come with that. For me, language has this, I need to play with that. And I'm a writer in a way. I write before I make any piece. So before I can conceive any of this piece, I write about it. So I say it first in writing. Because that was the only tool I had before.
Right.
I knew how to write in a journalist school. So that was the first thing I learned. And so writing was very important and how I think things. And I think, yeah, semiotic has to do with that. Just the way I relate to language, probably, and how I want to play with words.
Sure, and then that's probably why your creatures don't talk, right?
Yes.
You do like most of that.
and my communication background has a lot to do with that. The fact that I'm working in interactivity, for example. It's the fact that I choose not to use words is because the communicative act with words, verbal language, is much more obvious or less open. Where you don't have words, the way that you have to relate or sort of the connotations are much more open, and the level, I mean, you have much more room to play with unintentional or intentional meanings. And because I think overall my work, it's about ambiguity in a way. I think it's the most ambiguous way of communication is nonverbal.
Yeah, and it's very sensorial,
and
like,
it's very
in a way.
sensorial.
That's why your work
Yeah,
is kind of very sensorial in that sense. And how much technology drives your aesthetics? Do you think if you weren't using technology, like if you were making these as sculpture, do you think like it limits you that you're using these tools, or do you? I mean,
sometimes I feel it limits me. Because I don't know. It's like I cannot even think without it. I think at some
without
point,
that
it's just
technology,
like,
right?
Like if I need to talk about technology, then I'm gonna use technology. I cannot paint technology. It's like it's
so
like
you just
there.
work with the limitation that offers.
Yeah, it's like it's part of it. It's that whole thing about how hard it is to me. It's part of the work, and I think that's what happened with the design machines. To me, we're like, wow, I'm putting myself to build these things, you know, and I build them all, and just to be there sitting and trying to, like, the machine wouldn't have any sense if I'm not there doing that action. And so those were really like made for that reason.
Sure. And going back to the whole women perspective of the piece, like that milk piece and also the other one, the cycles, the waiting, I think they have a lot to do with like a woman's sensibility and time, sense of time. So
yeah,
I still think
there are things there.
Right?
Like, yeah.
Perfect. So let's just open the question, please, Mehmet.
It's very interesting that I have a question from the first part, that when you were describing at least you listed 4 criteria that you want to basically avoid certain things. One of them, like intention, I was thinking, well, that's functionality or purpose. So anyway, I thought that you had that effort to extract intelligence out of the context of biological context. So basically, you want to just extract the intelligence and then leave it alone and not even attach anything else. But at the same time, I was just puzzled with the concept that intelligence actually emerged because of the biology, because of those everything you wanted to eliminate. And then all of a sudden I found that, well, you returned back to that. You wanted to actually put everything back into the same context, which created an autonomous creature. Do you think that it was actually first extracted and then you tried to avoid, but then you put it back into the same place that you got it?
Well, yeah, I think I was always aware that I'm using intelligence because I have sensors, I have a microcontroller there that I have to program, and that's there. I think it's otherwise it wouldn't be a robot. It will be a kinetic sculpture to me. So I'm aware that that intelligence is there. What I don't want to do is refer again to these imaginaries of what is supposed to be an intelligent machine. Not that this is not intelligent, and that's why, because I believe this is like a supreme level of intelligence. Our way of breathing, the way that we sweat, the way that we, I don't know, we get hot or cold. I mean, that's super intelligent, and it's so intelligent, it's so smart that we cannot even imitate it. And then so I think it's coming from that, from believing that biology is much smarter than we are and that we can achieve copying them.
So maybe we should really separate human intelligence and machine intelligence. They are not necessarily superimposed in certain aspects.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not impossible, it's just we are not there yet. And I think that's the thing. I just wanted to say, like, we are not there yet, even though we can watch all these movies that are talking about that. We still have a lot to do, a lot of research. And I think a lot of this just came after really looking what other artists were doing and see, okay, what else is there that, so there are more artists now working in this direction, but the first couple of robotic work that if you can think, like, it's very short the history of robotic art, but if you think about it, all this first work, and I do really admire some of them, I don't know, Bill Bourne or Louis Philippe Demers, all these like, but they were doing again these super like like made out of metal, super strong machines, even the survival research lab and all those crazy things, which I really love as work. But I was like, okay, how we can address also this other side that I think is much more closer. There are much more interesting research within bioart, for example. Bioart somehow is talking about these things more than robotic art somehow.
It's a good question, especially like with robotics. We see a lot of anthropomorphic, like figures, which your creatures have nothing to do with that. Yeah.
I have a question. With the fur piece that you get inside of, I had immediately I was thinking, how's she breathing? Where's her oxygen supply?
No, it's perfect. This is a toy. I mean, actually, the whole thing is an inflatable ball. It's a toy for kids, so kids will survive. I mean, they sell it in the market, so it's fine. So I bought it.
How long were you actually in the ball?
How long?
Yeah,
well, depends on the again, like how long is the opening, and then I do perform some extra days. It's very comfortable because it's like you can be laying there. I mean, you get tired if you're moving a lot, then you can rest and do some small movement. But it's for kids to roll in the mountain or whatever. And then what I just put on top is just fabric, so it can really allow you to breathe.
Okay. My second part is that if you're programming these other robotics and you figure out what sort of behavior and interaction. Now, when you embody it, are you a character? Do you have consistent behavior or goals when you're inside of this?
No, I don't think I have a goal. I just want to make it move. I mean, that particular piece, I want to make it move the way I.
But based on other people's, like the
based on other people. Yeah, if I can hear something, then I'll get there. It's kind of hard, but again, and it's a very mechanical thing because this came right when I was doing anima. Alexithymia is different because it's a hydraulic system, but when you're trying to do and that's, I guess, also why I did all the mechanical other work. Mechanics is somehow much difficult to me because it implies a lot of knowledge that I didn't have. And so when doing the breathing like system, it made me learn. I mean, I needed to learn a lot of mechanics, and there was many times when whatever I was doing, it was like not soft enough, really fast. Not fast enough, like have all the things. And it was so easy for me to reproduce as a human, like, I want this. And so that piece came after, like, oh, what if I have a huge ball and it will do this? And I was like, oh, I'll just get in and it seriously does that, because I can do it.
Because you're running the machine now. It's so much easier. Yeah. And did you collaborate with engineers or like in any of these works? Really?
In alexithymia, I did. It was the first work, and so I collaborated with an engineer back in Argentina called Miguel Grassi. He helped me with figuring out like problems that I had. It was at some point it was not that difficult because the entire body of the sculpture is made out of like sensors, but when it gets wet, after a while, especially if you have like now, this piece is like up for like 6 months, and after 6 months of getting wet, you have a lot of problems there. And so that is when I needed like someone that was like, okay, how we can fix it? Because it could run for a little while, but with anima it was much, once I figured out the mechanical part, it was easy. And then, no, I tried to do it all myself. And that's why I guess I get too attached and it takes me so long.
Why is that? Do you not enjoy like the collaborative aspects with like engineers or scientists?
No, I do.
Or how is that
It depends. Sometimes it's anima, alexithymia have a big budget. Anima didn't. I had to do it. It really depends on that. Working collaboratively with, I haven't found a partner that we can work one by one and then we all run together. Like I always find myself that having to pay, which I think is fine, but it really depends on my budget in a way. And the other ones, for example, I just needed to like help for like, I have some assistance with the big machine, with the metal one, help for like the welding and all that. But no, and then in this one, I'm collaborating with Gustavo, but really it's a collaborator. It's not that he doesn't even know robotics. He's like, we're working together.
He's more of an architect, right?
Yeah, he's an architect,
right? Yeah.
So,
sure, Greg, please.
I'm kind of curious about this word research and how artists use that. I mean, it's becoming like we're now looking at ourselves rather than as painters necessarily, or as just this kind of axiom. You know, the word built around artists. We're now like considering ourselves as, you know, researchers. And I'm curious, in your research, how you end up qualifying, or rather quantifying, you know, the effects of what you're doing, because you were interested in watching your audience, or the viewers that came into the gallery, and how that informs your work, and how that feeds back out as you, as the researcher, informing.
yeah, I think it's different from maybe other mediums because technology already has that. It has already implied some sort of scientific side. I think it has that implied. To me, I see myself as a researcher perhaps because I never saw myself as an artist, because I was not educated as that. I was never in an art school until 2 years ago when I did my MFA, so I never knew how it was. Like, never went to a critique, ever had a critique, never knew what that was. So for me, it was the only way I could relate. It was like writing, going back, doing it, look how it works, going back to write, looking again, apply to a grant, do it. So my personal experience was coming from that, for more an academic kind of like place. And I think a lot of people working in new media is also like, they do it that way. And I don't know if like the whole field thing that I do, or like looking how it works. And it was not really like on purpose. It just happened that the first time I showed Alexi Timi, I had to be there for a long time, because the first time I showed was in Spain, and it was in this weird institution where they want you to be there all the time next to the piece. So I gotta be there 4 days, saying hi to the queen and the king and all these things that they do, which is great because they are having really good funding institution, but we gotta do all those business also. And so I started looking everything that happened there. And so then I learned, oh, this is really interesting just to be there sitting for a couple of hours.
And observing what people are doing, yeah.
Yeah, because it's like such an active observation. And that's what I'm asking, sort of an active observation. And that is also changing a lot of things for me when I conceive something. Because if I know that I don't want people to do this all the time, then I'm not going to do a piece that will provoke this. You know, like now I'm much more aware and less intuitive, which is bad. I mean, it has a bad part to it. Which is, yeah, I'm really conscious of what I want them not to do. And it has to do a lot with interactive art. There are really like a lot of questioning about interactive art and how reactive it is sometimes and how weak it is sometimes. And I try to question that and say like, okay, it's possible to do some different kind of interactive art. It's not just this thing that we can do with games. I don't know, which is nothing bad about that, but it's different.
I guess I'm asking more like how that gets conveyed. You know, like your observation, like, so you put it in this arena of observation, and then, you have these active responses, or you have these passive responses, or whatever, of people coming through, watching you, perform, watching you. And how do you then write up your report on that? That's more what I'm asking. So, not like you have to write up a report, but I'm just saying, how do you sort of quantify that experience as research? That's always my question about it.
Which is, it is interesting because as artists, we tend to not actually watch people interact with our pieces afterwards. We just set it up, we present it, and we don't watch people interact with or observe the pieces as much. So, is that part of the research for you afterwards to watch?
Well, yeah, informs the next piece. I don't think I can qualify, or I can quantify or qualify it with that piece because it's already done. It just informs the next one. That's what I think it is. It's really something that it goes to the future. I never change a piece because of that. It always been like that. It's like that, and it's doing this, but I know next time this or that. It's really like into the future, and it also helps me to like explain the work, and also help me to write about the work. But once it's done, it's like it's kind of hard. Although I did with Anima, but I didn't really change it. I was in grad school by then, so I had a lot of people coming through and see how was the reaction. But not that I really changed it. It was more like, Well, then I had a question actually in that regards. You seem to have done a lot of the work before you go to do your MFA, right? You were really making art and you were showing and all of that before you even start your MFA. First of all, why did you do the MFA? And then how did that affect you as an artist? Yeah. Was that good? Was it restricted you more? How do you? It paused for a long time my practice, my showing, my active way of showing. It really affected. It paused it? It paused it, yeah. Which I knew that. I decided, well, first of all, in Argentina we don't have masters in art, so there's not MFA back there. But I really wanted to study art in a way. I really feel that I was getting in a moment where I will either be doing all the time the same, or I just needed a change or something. I had an experience before coming to the US to do my MFA. I was a visiting scholar at UCLA, and they invited me there for 7 months. And there, it's well, I did this click. I was like, oh, there is a master in art. Fine, good. So you could do that. I didn't know that. In Argentina we don't have it. You don't need to teach. So I was teaching without the MFA, yeah. So I didn't really need it. But I was like, oh, this is a really good. So I've been at UCLA really helped me to see what was grad school here in the US, and that it was possible. Because there's also the things where you're so far away that you don't think it's even possible. And I have this, my biggest mentor, which is Gustavo Kreml. Now I'm collaborating with him. He was my thesis advisor when I was in Argentina, but he did his grad school here in the US. So I had this education of him saying you should go do this. He will be always mentoring me, and so that's why I think I came here. But I remember he saying, well, you're going to do this. You're not going to show anymore for the next 2 years. And it did happen. And I was like, fine. Yeah. I show, but it's this active thing of going and having a show after a show didn't happen anymore. Because I was producing new things. I really think it was great. I was What did that add to you being an artist, really, the MFA? Do you think it was just a degree for you, or it changed your practice? I don't know if it changed it really. It changed my life in a way because I'm here now. Yeah. My practice, I'm not sure. I really did get a lot of good feedback, and I'm really happy where I went. I think I made the really right decision. On going to Ohio State, and that really helped me a lot. Just to understand how things work here. Because this is also another thing. Argentina is really far away in the map. And I needed to like see what was going on, and at the same time I was feeling that Argentina was too small. Not the guy was like too big for Argentina, not at all. It's just like, it was always the same, we know everyone. And so I was like, after coming from UCLA, like for me it was like, I want to do something different. Just that.
Cool. And Greg, do you have any questions about the research again, or you got the answer? Okay. Wonderful. Cool. Very good. Any other comments, questions? I'm especially interested to know if there are any scientists or engineer here who they found like this type of approach to technology like interesting.
Unrespectful.
Or if there are any, but I think mainly there are artists here.
What I'm really interested in is like this idea of how much the actual making of it has to do with advancing the idea. Like you conceptualize, you want to do this thing, and here are the parameters. And that's the way a scientist approaches something, basically. You have this theory, and you're going to prove it, and you're going to make this machine, and you're going to do this thing. But then in the making of it, something happens that's different. I mean, that is kind of beyond your control in some ways, because you've got to figure out the process and the aesthetics of it and the dynamics of the materials. And so you're trying to rub all this together around this idea, and something else happens. Or it takes on a life and a sensibility of its own. And to me, that's the critical part of what we do as experimenters, artists, scientists, whatever, that plays a dynamic role in that. And I think it's really interesting not having had any formal background to then go.
Yeah, probably that's true. I didn't have that experimental intuition. Like I didn't have it. And that's something that grad school sort of taught me in a way. Because I didn't have it. I was like, well, you got a plan, you do it. It's like writing a paper, or you have a thesis, you got to do it. There's not much room to play. You have your sketches, you go for it. Well, yeah, in art it's not like that all the time. And I learned to get a little bit more relaxed with that and learn from that, which I didn't have it before. And Alexithymia took me 2 years to do it. And it's certainly exactly the same as I proposed it to be. It took me so much. Probably I could do much more interesting work with all the failures that I just avoided.
Right.
Because it was not, I was focused. I needed to do this. So I think, grad school definitely helped me in like trying to experiment a little bit more and having some room. The other bad thing is like this work, it's somehow expensive.
Yeah.
And you need to get money. And in order to get money, you need to write a good grant. And in order to write a good grant, you need to have a good proposal that sets all the rules up front. And so there's much less way and then you have to prove that you did it. So there's also that part with maybe new media art that, like now, like with this proposal, the piece that I'm working right now. So I wrote this proposal, I had this idea, but I had to write this proposal in order to get a grant. Okay, now I have to do it. I don't even know how to start, kind of.
Right.
It's like, but so I need to really do it in order, like in a year, how to prove them. So there's also that, because sometimes new media or electronics runs with this format from science, perhaps.
Was it easier for you to get grants in Argentina for new media, or do you find like sources here that you can actually apply for grants and everything?
No, I don't think it's back there the situation is pretty bad.
Okay, like anywhere probably else,
like
right?
anywhere. So there are a few things, but just real little.
Sure.
Yeah.
But one thing is interesting is like your experience kind of shows that we can all do this. Like we as artists, we're so afraid of touching technology and science and robotics and everything because it's such a different language. But you know, seems like you as a writer and someone who was doing like journalism, for instance, you just got into it and you're doing all of that. So is that what approach you're taking at the art school? Like now that you're teaching your students, like
yeah, no, definitely, definitely. I think it's. And you don't need to know everything. I don't know anything. I mean, really, I just know a little, and I just have a trigger there, and I'm just going to research on that, and just you make it. It's really not
but it's so intimidating for many.
Yeah, it might be intimidating, but to me, it's much more intimidating to draw. Gosh, I have no idea how to draw anything. You know, like I don't know how to draw. It's just like, to me, it's intimidating.
Right.
But it's, I
just
guess,
your tool,
it's like
right.
It's pretty much like that, I think, for everyone. Of course, I need to do it, and I need to take a drawing class sometime in my life, you know, and then I'll learn it. But I think it's all everything.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, guys. This was very
you
nice.
much.
Thank you so much, Paula. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.